Hello and welcome to Twist List. Today we are looking at 10 discoveries of lost cultures that may rewrite our history. It's been said that history is written by the victors. But sometimes, history is rewritten, or at least given a few edits, by archaeologists, historians, and other researchers who unearth the secrets of lost cultures long after the victors have perished. Still, for all we've learned, many mysteries remain. The fifth spot on the list is occupied by Peru. The Srubna, aka Srubnaya, culture existed from approximately 1950 BC to 1200 BC in the area from the Ural Mountains to central Ukraine. In Russian, Srub means timber framework, which explains why this culture is best known for its burial chambers, resembling log cabins made of timber, that are located under burial mounds called kurgans. The burial chambers, which were considered to be houses of the dead, looked a lot like rooms that the Srubna people lived in above ground. Even so, over 95% of the Srubna dead were buried in regular earthen graves. So the name of the culture is a bit misleading. Researchers have found thousands of small Srubna settlements throughout Eastern Europe, most with only a few houses each, but the settlements do have differences. So it's more of a family of cultures. Nevertheless, archaeologists know so little about these people that they really haven't been able to divide them into clear groups. Besides grave sites, scientists have mostly found pottery shards and tools made of stone or bronze. Many of the sites appear to be poor in a material sense. There's some evidence of agriculture but more of animal breeding, mainly cows, horses, pigs, and sheep. Again, it differs by region, and scientists debate how to interpret their findings. In 2011, archaeologists discovered what appeared to be a stone sundial in one of the Srubna burial mounds. A researcher at Southern Federal University in Russia confirmed that the markings would have shown time accurately. In fact, it was surprisingly sophisticated from a geometry perspective. Number 4 on the list is the Qijia Culture. Named by archaeologists after the location of an excavation site, the primitive Dorset people inhabited Arctic Canada and Greenland from about 800 BC to AD 1300. No one's sure where they originated or why they ultimately disappeared, but we do know that they were a largely isolated people. They settled on the coasts, fishing and hunting nearby animals for food. Archaeologists have combined scientific analysis with stories told by the Inuit of the Tunit, their name for the Dorset people, whom the Inuit met about 1,000 years ago when they crossed from Alaska into Arctic Canada. According to the Inuit, the Dorset people were extremely strong but gentle giants who were skilled hunters. They could snap the neck of a walrus with a harpoon line then drag the animal home. Their tools were a mystery. They were so small and precise that they seemed unfit for harpooning or cutting up animals, scraping skins, or performing daily household chores. Yet the Dorset were able to manipulate tools skillfully, often at the end of a handle. The Dorset were frequent traders, which archaeologists could trace from unusual materials like meteorite iron that was specific to that region. However, there's little evidence that the Dorset people made technological advances. It appears that they didn't use dog sleds or kayaks in their daily lives. Although the Dorset people were timid around outsiders, the Inuit claimed that the Dorset men were madly in love with their wives. Perhaps that's because so few women appeared to live among them. According to DNA analysis, there was little diversity in maternally inherited DNA in the studied samples, which means few women migrated with the men to Arctic Canada and Greenland. The Dorset people didn't appear to intermarry or have sex with visitors from other cultures. Archaeologists can't explain why the Dorset people so completely isolated themselves but think it may have to do with their spiritual beliefs. At the third place we have 5. About 5,000 years ago in the 3rd millennium BC, an ancient culture known as the Magan civilization is believed to have inhabited what is now northeastern Oman. Archaeologists are excavating the sites of Bat, Al-Qudm, and Al-Ain, believing they were ancient trading centers with Mesopotamia from 3000 BC to 2000 BC. There's also a large cemetery and massive stone structures known as towers, which appear to be platforms for temples, houses, or some other missing structures. Archaeologists don't understand how they were used yet. Magan was believed to be a major copper mining site, whose people actively traded with other cultures. It's a real mystery trying to determine who the Magan people were, what they did, and even exactly where they were located. The people of Magan did not use writing or glyptic arts to record their history or organize their societies, so we know very little about their way of life, wrote Christopher Thornton, consulting scholar at the Penn Museum. The Magan people obviously had a significant impact on their neighbors because other cultures name the Magan in their writings. Accounts of trade from the Assyrian, Indus Valley, and Sumerian civilizations call Magan the Mountain of Copper and credit their economic success to trading with Magan in copper, stone, and wood. At the second spot is Eastern Europe. In 2014, a team of archaeologists from Polish, Peruvian, and Colombian universities announced a startling discovery in the northern Atacama Desert in Peru. They found 150 mummies from an unknown culture that dated to a period from the 4th to the 7th century AD, almost 500 years before the Tiwanaku, a civilization that predated the Inca, appeared in the region, wrapped in mats, cotton shrouds, or nets. The bodies were buried in the sand without any stone structures to give them away, which may explain why grave robbers never found them. Although archaeologists knew nothing of these people before this recent discovery, the burials do give us some limited information about their culture. In addition to maces that can crush skulls, the scientists found some bows, quivers, and obsidian heads in the graves, which may indicate that these are elite people who are taking their power with them into another life. The presence of bows was particularly interesting because they're so rare in Peru. A llama was also found, which means these animals were brought into this area of Peru far earlier than we thought. The archaeologists discovered pottery, tools, and metal jewelry buried with the bodies. The mummies also had reed withes fastened to their ears. The withes extended to the surface, which may mean they were communication devices used by the living to talk to the dead. We learned a lot about what equipment had been used, such as baskets and fishing nets, said lead researcher Józef Sikulski to IB Times UK, what these people were doing, which was agriculture and fishing, how they dressed, what ornaments they wore and even how they combed their hair. All of these details indicate an advanced culture lived in that part of Peru at a time when we thought it was uninhabited. And finally, at number 1, Dorset Culture. Although vigorously debated by different factions of researchers at the moment, the history of Chinese civilization may be in for a major rewrite. Until recently, the Xia dynasty was believed to be the wellspring of Chinese civilization in the Yellow River Valley region around 4,100 years ago. But now, historians are debating whether Chinese civilization actually began with the Hongshan culture 6,500 years ago and is thousands of years older than we thought. We know that the Hongshan lived in an area between Inner Mongolia and what is now Liaoning and Hebei provinces in northeastern China. Even though they produced some of the earliest jade artifacts, including the first known dragon symbol, the Hongshan culture is usually disregarded because it was considered to be too far from the original source of Chinese civilization. That may be changing. The Hongshan culture was complex, as suggested by a goddess temple in their area and archaeological evidence that they traded with shepherds from Mongolia. Scientists have also found many Hongshan artifacts in the Hunshandake sandy lands, which is 300 kilometers, 185 miles, farther west than where the Hongshan culture was originally discovered. The most surprising element was that the artifact suggested that numerous Hongshan fished and hunted in the region. Originally, the desert in Hunshandake was believed to be around 1 million years old. But new research estimates the desert's age at a mere 4,000 years old. That means the climate changed radically while the Hongshan lived there. We're amazed by how much water there was back then, paleoclimatologist Luis Scuderi told Live Science. There were very, very large lakes, and grasslands and forests. And based on all the artifacts we've found out there, there was clearly a very large population along the lake shores. Some scientists believe that when the 20,000 square kilometer, 7,800 mi2, Hunshandake was turned into a desert about 4,200 years ago, the Hongshan were forced to migrate south for survival. As they moved into other areas, they may have played a more important role in creating Chinese civilization than we originally realized. And finally, at number 1, CSS Shenandoah, CSA. The Japanese War Council agreed not to surrender after Hiroshima was destroyed, vowing to fight on until either every single person on the Japanese islands was dead, or the invaders desisted. When the Soviets declared war on August 9, the Japanese army's most senior officers set about declaring martial law to stop anyone from negotiating peace. Almost exactly 11 hours later, downtown Nagasaki was obliterated and Emperor Hirohito declared the unconditional surrender of the Empire of Japan. Several thousand Japanese still resisted this announcement for a few days. It took until August 15 for the declaration of the cessation of the hostilities to reach all American warships in the Pacific. The last shot of the entire Second World War was not a bullet but a torpedo, fired from the submarine Torsk off Kasumiko, north of the southwest Honshu coast. The Torsk, commanded by Bafford Llewellyn, had been hunting military cargo ships and sighted one escorted by an armed frigate. It fired on and sank the frigate first, but the cargo ship was shielded by coral reefs and escaped. About 1 hour later, at midday on the 14th, a second frigate entered the area and dodged the Torsk's torpedo. The Torsk then fired again, this time the newly designed, electrically propelled Mark 27 torpedo, which homed in on its target via sonar, and broke the ship into pieces. Several more armed vessels and airplanes converged on the area, and the Torsk remained underwater for over 7 hours before escaping. The next morning, Commander Llewellyn relayed to the ship that Japan had given up. Number 4 on the list war in human history had come to its end. These instruments were used in oral and rectal formats, and in the larger vaginal one. They are forced into the mouth, rectum or vagina of the victim and they're expanded by force of the screw to the maximum aperture of the segments. The inside of the cavity in question is irremediably mutilated, nearly always fatally so. The pointed prongs at the end of the segments serve better to rip into the throat, the intestines or the cervix. The oral pair was often inflicted on heretical preachers, but also on lay persons guilty of unorthodox tendencies. The rectal pair awaited passive male homosexuals, and the vaginal one women guilty of sexual union with Satan or his familiars. Pictured above is a version of the choke pair called the pair of anguish. At the third place we have lead sprinkler. The lead sprinkler was essentially a ladle on the end of a handle. The top half of the sphere could be removed and the lower half was filled with molten metal, boiling oil, boiling water, pitch or tar. The perforated top half was then reattached. Shaking or flicking the sprinkler towards the victim showered him or her with the boiling contents of the ladle. The victim had, of course, been pinioned in advance. At the second spot is breast ripper. This item was used both as a punitive and an interrogational device. Punitively, it was used red hot to mark the breast of unmarried mothers. In an inquisitory nature, it was used on condemned women, convicted of heresy, blasphemy, adultery, self-induced abortion, erotic white magic and any other crime that the inquisitors selected. The claws were used, either cold or heated, on a female's exposed breasts, rendering them into bloody pulps. A variation was called the spider. This consisted of clawed bars which protruded from the wall. A woman was pulled alongside the bars until her breasts were torn away. And finally, at number 1, crocodile shears. The crocodile shears was an instrument of torture used in late medieval Europe and typically reserved for regicides, those who attempted, and, perhaps, succeeded, to assassinate the king. The shears were made of iron and were based upon the concept of pincers, but, instead of standard jaws or blades, crocodile shears ended in a pair of hemi-cylindrical blades that, when closed together, formed a long, narrow tube. The insides of the blades were generously lined with teeth or spikes. After being heated red hot, the crocodile shears were applied to the erect penis, which, once exposed to sufficient tension, was torn from the prisoner's body, or at the very least leading to severe arterial bleeding. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more, then please hit the subscribe button.